Hi, everyone. My name is Lizabeth Perez. My classmates in this group project were Alma, Zuniga, Kimberly Gill, and Areli. First, I want to talk about the demographics of the population we interviewed. This was an elderly population. We looked into individuals who were ranging from the age of 65 to 77. Most of them were women. Some of them were Hispanic, and one community expert in the medical field. Exploring this community was the starting point of unraveling the commonalities and the traits that the elderly population possess. Next slide, please. Before we begin our interview, a few personal biases that I carried were that this population was traditional, stuck in the ways, hard to hear, warm but incompetent, and I assumed that they were boring. These biases disharmonized myself with working with older adults and wanting to advocate for them. That in itself became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because I thought they were boring, I asked boring questions, and because I asked boring questions, I got boring answers. And another assumption that we made before our interviews was that each of us realized we didn't ask our interviewees about identification of gender, sex, sexual orientation, or religious affiliation. We assumed that asking this was disrespectful, or that because they had a spouse, they were always straight. These assumptions made us realize that we put them in a box of being traditional. We didn't allow them to express themselves in those identifications. Next slide, please. The stereotypes that limited the right to self-determination. Throughout COVID, we have seen policymakers and the public stereotyping those over the age of 70 as helpless, fragile, unable to make decisions for themselves, and unable to contribute to society, and that they need to be protected. This meant that family members think that they know what is best and that they are doing the right thing, but failing to let older people make decisions for themselves is patternistic and threatens people's autonomy and independence. It's important that we notice that the choices we make and the actions we constitute are a significant part of who we are. We must have the freedom to make decisions for ourselves within family context and going about our lives, no matter what age we are. Next slide. One of the most apparent things I found in my interview was the need for companionship. In older adults, we know that the brain thrives on activity and stimulation. This need doesn't disappear after retiring or losing a spouse or the death of lifelong friends. Often we assume that loneliness is a symptom of aging. This assumption removes our responsibility of interacting with our elders. As social workers, we should remember that the relationship between and among people are important for change, and thus it enhances the well-being of older adults and everyone. And next slide, please. And then these are just a few tips how to kick our unconscious biases. First, being mindful. The next time you're around an older person, pay attention to your initial response and hone in on how you interact differently with someone that's older versus someone your own age, and then attempt to equalize that. Learn your triggers. Write down 5 negative stereotypes you think about older people, then jot down 5 positive responses or traits. The next time you feel that you're biased against an older person, recall these positive traits so you could counteract that reaction. Another step would be getting past someone's age. Instead of labeling someone as old, focus on the traits that you admire or you find interesting about them. So instead of the old lady on the 3rd floor, she is Linda and she brews her own IPA. And lastly, aim to diversify. Hang out with people who can mentor you in the industry and in your personal life. That enhances your well-being as well as the well-being of others, and specifically our elders. Next slide.
Some important things I think social workers should keep in mind when they consider working with individuals from this community are their biases on older adults, the process of aging, and ageism. Our biases on older adults developed based on our experiences and the messages we received and continue to receive from society, thus influencing the way we interact with this group. We tend to recall images of a family member, family friend, or neighbor when we think of old. And if they were sick, disabled, or dying, paired with any specific personality traits, whether good or bad, those early memories serve as internalized stereotypes of what it means to be old. Next slide, please. We're raised to believe that aging is equivalent to a less than ideal quality of life, that aging means movement and exercise is harmful, and ultimately that aging equals pain. We often hear the process of aging referenced as a decline. However, research rejects this perception, showing that older adults are quite adaptable. Our brains continue to produce new cells, making new connections, which allows things like physical health to be improved greatly with exercise and cognitive health to be flexible. Older adults are still able to learn and develop in their later years, even if their reflexes slow down. Next slide, please. The combination of our own biases and the messages we learn about aging makes us operate off of internalized ageism, causing us to harshly criticize ourselves and one another. When we deny old age, we exclude and overlook those who are impacted by ageism, causing us to ignore how this type of oppression interacts with other oppressions and reinforces them. Next slide, please. I interviewed a physical therapist that works closely with this population, and one of the main themes that emerged from our conversation is how he works to promote self-efficacy for his elderly population. He explained how his role is not to rob them of their self-efficacy, but to provide them with the tools and knowledge to cope and manage their health effectively. When he's met with resistance due to past traumatic experiences with healthcare or not believing their treatment is going to work, he tries to wholeheartedly listen to their story. He'll ask questions that might dive a little bit deeper into their belief systems to figure out why they're resistant, learn more about their negative experiences, and then validate and empathize with them. Then he creates a plan of care with his patient's input that is individualized for them. He makes sure to reassess and allow for them to provide feedback so that he can readjust their treatment if that is needed. It's important to him to establish trust so that his patient feels heard and empowered. His active approach to physical therapy in collaboration with his elderly patients promotes their self-efficacy and provides them the tools to develop coping strategies, to self-assess and self-appraise in moments of pain flare-ups or health-related issues, all on their own. Next slide, please. The social work value of dignity and self-worth is most apparent when working with adults age 65 and older, being that we seek to enhance clients' capacity and opportunity to change and to address their own needs. One way we can fight against ageism as social workers is by learning more about the process of aging and shifting the way we view aging and late adulthood. We will limit ourselves and our clients if we navigate the world through ageist beliefs by only doing what we think we can or what we should do based on our age. In alignment with the social work value of dignity and self-worth, we must see older persons as capable of making changes, still learning, still developing, and still growing. After all, they have a future. Next slide, please.
Like my classmates, I had biases towards older people. Growing up, the older people around me were cold, grumpy, and evil. Because of my experiences, I believed all older people were the same. As future social workers, we need to identify our biases and prevent them from interfering with our work with clients. The ethnographic interview was the first step in learning more about the elder community. The interview expanded my perspective and made me see things through a different lens. The elder community have many strengths and also face barriers. Social workers need to understand that every elder situation is different. Social workers also need to be aware of the resources that are available and limited to the community. Some of the barriers identified through our interviews were transportation barriers, limited income, technology, companionship, loss, fears, life changes, and transitioning from being independent to dependent. Every elder has specific needs. For instance, we had 2 interviewees with different situations. An elder who was a widow and was having difficulty with her husband's death. She did have reliable income. She worked part-time, She had familial support and was mobile. The second interviewee had no familial support, received only $400 per month from SSI, did not have a stable home, and was searching for an income-based senior living home. When searching, she discovered that the wait list for senior income-based homes were 2 years or more. She had no transportation and was dependent on her wheelchair. An elder person cannot make a living with $400 a month. Although both interviewees were from the same community, they had different needs. And social workers need to be aware of these needs that are very specific depending on the client. And this is gonna force us to think outside of the box. Besides physical barriers, the elderly face internal struggles. The elder were once young and capable of doing everything and anything on their own. With age, some members of the elder community are unable to work, care for themselves, live alone, and more. Shifting from being independent to being dependent on others may be a difficult transition for some. Some members must depend on others to meet their basic needs. Social workers need to be sensitive to these changes. Losing independence and shifting to being dependent is not easily, especially if the shift is outside of our client's control. It is common to view elders as being fragile and helpless. Family members often take the role of decision makers for their elders. As social workers, we need to make sure that we consider what our elder clients want. We want to be the voice for our clients when they are being silenced. This does not mean that family members are doing this intentionally. Family members want the best, but that doesn't always follow along with what the elders want. For example, Beatrice was one of my interviewees, and she recently lost her husband unexpectedly from one day to another, and she was in a state of shock and pain. Her children helped her financially, but she did not receive emotional support. Losing her husband was extremely difficult. She remembers feeling lonely and asking him, "Honey, why did you leave me? You said we would be together forever." Beatrice was battling depression and found a church where she received the emotional support she so desperately needed after losing her husband. She described the church as a warm place where she was able to smile again. One night, her daughter went with her to church, and her daughter realized that it was in an unsafe neighborhood and transferred Beatrice to a different church. Beatrice lost her emotional support, safe place, and distraction from being home alone. Beatrice's daughter wanted what was best, but that left Beatrice feeling alone again. When elders have familial support, it's important to listen to both sides. Do not forget that elders have a voice. Although family decisions are important, they often exclude the wants of the person being impacted. It's important as social workers to be the platform where the elder can speak their mind. Beatrice had one final message for the younger community, and that message was to respect the elder. It is easy to view the elderly as mean, grouchy, fragile, and vulnerable, but they have lived lives we are unaware of. We do not know what they have been through. Social workers need to take into consideration their past and present self when working with them. Help the elder. They are full of knowledge and experiences. Include them and stop excluding them. Beatrice said, "Haz bien y no mires a quién," which translates to do good and do not look at who, which means to always give a helping hand without judgment. Be genuine when helping others and do not expect anything in return. Be kind to the elders because we will one day be in their shoes.
Hi everyone, this is Areli, and I had the pleasure of working with this group on examining the senior community. We each spoke with either seniors or someone working directly with the population. One of the most important things I have learned is that no two seniors are alike, and it is important to get to know their story. Even though they may belong to the same community based on their age, each senior is an individual with a unique story and experience of their own. It is important, if not vital, to take the time to listen to that story and to try and understand them for who they are. By being patient and asking questions, one can learn what that senior believes and values, what they cherish, and what makes them see the world the way they do. By listening to them, one can accurately explore their needs, challenges, and strengths. One should never assume to know anything about a senior until they begin to know them and speak with them on that individual level. Next slide, please. Another thing to consider is that seniors are an absolute necessity to our society. They pass down culture and knowledge to the younger generations, and they continue to do so throughout their lives. They are vital to society and play important roles in supporting their families, friends, and communities. Many seniors work and take on additional responsibilities, including caring for their children and grandchildren, teaching, mentoring, volunteering, and staying active in their community. Through their life experiences, they can provide us with hope and strength, wisdom and possibility. It is necessary as a society to acknowledge their importance and see them as individuals worthy of respect and dignity. It is imperative that we value all seniors and provide them with opportunities for creative expression and active engagement, not only with other seniors, but with individuals across all generations. Next slide, please. Before I began this project, I would have been considered an ageist. I did not understand the value of this community, and I did not fully respect their worth. I remember seeing an intern at my previous place of employment who was older than me. I automatically felt this judgment against her, asking myself, what would make them, my company, hire someone that old? Wouldn't they want someone younger who has more years to give them? By her 6-month anniversary, she had become one of the most valuable caseworkers in my unit. She connected to clients and peers easily, and her kindness, generosity, and attitude forced me to take back every misconception I had made against her in my head. She quickly became someone I would look up to and aspire to be more like. She is one of the reasons I am here today, continuing my education through social work. Next slide. Now I would like to discuss some personal perspectives from my interview. For example, we must be careful when using the word old, as it can be considered derogatory, especially in the way it is said and the context in which it is used. Old can imply limiting what someone is capable of in both their physical and mental capacities. Consider using the term senior, mature, or even of the older group instead of referring when referring to this community. Also remember that any age group can be vulnerable, not just seniors. Vulnerability can arise from various factors, including a trusting nature and a person's mental and intellectual capacities. It is not a fact of life for every senior. And finally, it is important to consider that seniors carry with them much wisdom and talent. A lot of them could teach the younger population necessary life skills. It is important to utilize seniors and to keep them active and engaged with the younger populations. Next slide. And finally, by doing this project, I have come to understand that members of the senior community can face various challenges. Now, some of the more common challenges include technology, transportation, lack of access to adequate and affordable medical care, need for continued companionship and engagement, and financial stability. It is essential that we support policies and build senior-friendly infrastructure now. Looking to other communities around the world, we can see some examples of how seniors are being valued, supported, and utilized throughout their lives. We can use these examples to advocate and fight for more senior-friendly policies and practices in the United States. But these policies will need support from everyone, not just the senior population itself. As a recovering ageist, I ask that you join me in advocating and supporting this population, and that you not only challenge and expect more from yourself, but from our society as well. Thank you again for listening to our presentation, and please feel free to ask us any questions about this wonderful population. Thank you.